Welcome to LOA Today. Walt Thiessen and life coach Cindy Chavez here. Today is Wednesday, February the 7th, 2018, 8 a.m. Eastern Time, your first daily dose of happy for the day. And we have happiness going on around this house, that's for sure, because we're anticipating some snow today. And while many people in the area are not happy about that, my wife is very happy about it. She's excited. So. And you know what the rule is, happy wife, happy life. So it definitely applies in this case, too.
Well, we're just going to keep sending that weather, the energy for that weather to be perfect for her skiing.
Absolutely. Yeah,
I think you said you wanted to tweak it by a couple of degrees colder, right? So
yeah, they're also saying that it could turn to ice, and we don't want that. So we want to make it a little bit colder so that it's pure as the driven snow, as they say.
Yes, perfect.
But yeah, that's the good news for today. And she's just, she woke up early this morning. Often she sleeps in. Not this morning.
Right.
She wanted to check, is there any snow on the ground yet? Yeah.
Oh, that's so cute. It reminds me of when my kids were little, and of course we live, down in the south where there is no snow, and there would be word that, we could get snow. It's going to be a miracle, but we could get snow, and they were getting up early and running out and looking, is it here, is it here?
Oh, yeah.
And we did actually get snow, so that's good. I hope
fun.
She has a great time skiing. That's
I'm
wonderful.
sure she will. And plus, we also had a really nice time last night. I think I mentioned to you previously that we have made some new LOA friends in the area, in the local area. And there's one particular couple that we really like. And we got together with them again last night, went out to dinner, had a great time. And just like the last time, we closed the restaurant. The staff are standing around saying, when are we going to get to go home? But we're having a great time.
Well, good.
Yeah.
That's great, when you can be with people that are like-minded, and that's a vibe lifter in itself.
Plus, they're like, you and I and the others on the podcast were laughing all the time. That's what it was like last night. Everything was just laugh, laugh, laugh. In fact, before we met up with them, they were, she actually runs a local sort of a new agey theater called the Buttonwood Tree. And this particular last night's activity was a thing called laughter yoga. Have you heard of that, laughter yoga?
I have, yes.
Okay, well, they were doing laughter yoga, so they were all warmed up before we even got there. And, so once we got together, it was even easier. We were just laughing at everything.
Laughter yoga, I have never done it like in a class, but I have seen it done, and I have, watched some videos, and it's so funny because at the beginning, it's so just ha 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 ha, ha forced.
Right.
And then suddenly something happens, and the real laughter hits, and it's so great. It's like, wow, talk about lifting your energy up.
Oh yeah.
And so that's really great. You got to be the receiver of that laughter that was the vibe that was already going, right? So it's kind of like a snowball. It's already got some momentum behind it.
Exactly. Oh yeah, it's wonderful when you have that, and they carried over beautifully. Literally, we laughed half of the meal. It was wonderful. So,
that's wonderful.
How's your last 24 hours been? Any wins the last few hours, so to speak?
Well, actually, something really great happened last night. I was cooking dinner, and I usually refer to my other half as the handsome sweetheart. So the handsome sweetheart came in, and he said, hey, he came in from work, and he said, hey, would you like to go on a date with me?
Oh, wow.
And I said, really? Sure. Because we always joke that, like, everything's a date with us. We go on a date all the time.
That's good.
But I had forgotten that next week was Valentine's Day.
Ah.
And so I thought he was just playing, and I said, sure, when is this date going to happen? And I think I made a joke. I said, well, I'm not sure. I'll have to check my calendar. And he said, well, he made reservations for my favorite restaurant for next Wednesday, which is Valentine's Day.
Yeah, there you go.
It's away, but I'm already looking forward to it.
Yeah, fantastic. Oh, that's a terrific win right there. All wins are good.
It's a restaurant that's way out in the country, and it just looks like nothing. It used to be the building actually used to be a general store, like, 100 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And they've made it into a restaurant, and it still looks like what you would think of as a kind of just a little wooden general store from the outside, but it has, like, famous cuisine, and it's not fancy on the inside. But what's funny about it is that it's kind of kitschy on the inside, but the food is really fancy. So it's like you could put that food in a very, very elegant, room, and it would fit. But so it's kind of just a fun place to go, but the food is out of this world, and so I'm excited about that.
That's great,
Exciting.
That's really good. Yeah. And well, actually, there's something else starting next week, because next Tuesday night is the first night that we're going to be doing a nighttime episode, a nighttime time slot for LOA Today. Tom Wells and I are going to be doing a slot on Tuesdays from 9 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time to give people who can't normally call in during the day an opportunity to call in, because we really want to build up the opportunity for people who just want to call in and chat, or if they got questions, or they want to share wins, or tell us about their latest LOA story. That's what we're hoping is going to happen. So just want to keep telling everybody every day that we're doing the podcast, mark Tuesdays from 9 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time on your calendar, because if you've been wanting to call in, that's going to be the time to do it.
Awesome. And actually, people can call in anytime that they're listening to us live.
Yeah, definitely.
Yes?
They can call in during the morning show, the afternoon show, and they're, excuse me, they're more than welcome to call. The number will actually be changing soon, but right now the number is 860-264-5432. And by all means, if you are able to call in during either the morning or the afternoon time slot, feel free to do so. We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, and so if you're used to listening at a later time via recording, just so you know, you can listen live and you can call us. So that would be great.
And by the way, if you don't know where to listen live, just go to the homepage, loatoday.net. There's a player right there. That's where you can listen live. So sometimes I forget to mention that. But yes.
Very good. There's got to be a time there's got to be a time slot for you, right? And if not, there's the recordings. But goodness, there's lots of opportunities to listen with all these shows that are going on, and really excited about that Tuesday night.
Yeah, me too. I think it's going to be fun. I think it'll be interesting to see, how long is the queue going to be, so to speak. Will people be calling in? First of all, will they call in at all? I mean, that's the first question. You always want to know, are they really going to do this? And then if they do call in, is it going to be like, one person, 5 people, 10 people? I don't know. We'll find out.
I don't know. I'm expecting the phone to be ringing, though, for sure.
I think it probably is going to. Yeah, I think it's going to be fun. So another thing that's kind of fun is our topic, because, excuse me, you came up with this one. I should probably let you introduce it because it is your topic. But we've been doing a book theme lately, and you found an interesting one to talk about.
Yeah, well, this is actually one of my favorite books, and I've been kind of racking my brain to, when did I know about this book? How did I hear about this book? I think I bought this book 20 years ago, and it's The Game of Life and How to Play It by Florence Scovil Shinn. And I'm looking at it. It's a small book, and not only is it small, but I'm looking at it right now, and my copy is dog-eared and highlighted, and 93 pages. So
wow.
It's small. It's not a big, wide book that's 93 pages.
Like a
it's
pocket
a small book. So it's not very big. I've read this book. There are a handful of books that I have always read sort of over and over, and this is one of them. And it was written by Florence Scovil Shinn, now she's considered to be one of the, important writers of the New Thought movement, or the prosperity writers.
Mm-hmm.
This book was published in 1925. And so the language is kind of old-fashioned at times, and it can either be annoying or add to its charm. I'm not sure how the reader looks at it, depending on who you are. But it's just a good little book. I think that anybody studying LOA should have a look at it. It's also, because it's public domain, I'm sure it's available all over the internet for free,
right?
To download or to just, read it on the computer. But her this is what's really funny is that I've always read this book kind of intermittently. You know, I was telling you that earlier. I'll read it and then it's just a short little book. I'll put it down and then, you know, maybe a month later, 2 years later, I don't know, I'll be thinking about it and I'll go grab it again. It always has an effect on me where it encourages me and lifts up my vibe, always, every time I open it. And one time I found this book that's a newer book that you may have heard of. It's called Outrageous Openness by Tosha Silver.
I don't recognize that.
I'm reading this woman's book, and she was like an astrologer for one of the big newspapers, and she wrote a column, and her writing's kind of funny. She told stories, and they asked her if she would put her posts or they weren't blog posts, I guess they were newspaper articles, into a book, and she edited them into a book. And I'm reading the book, and the whole time I'm feeling like I could have written it. Like, that's how much I resonated with it, right? And then suddenly, you know, part of the way into the book, she starts talking about who influenced her the most, and it was Florence Scovil Shinn.
Ah, yes.
I was like, oh, my goodness. So we talked about Neville last week.
Right.
And about how a lot of Neville's teaching is all sort of wrapped up in his idea of what the Bible, the Christian Bible, meant, which was a very esoteric kind of ideology about what those scriptures meant. Florence Scovil Shinn is right there, but not quite as, you won't see it as much, but she does talk about spiritual law. That's like her big thing. And if we talk about the law of attraction, you know, that's kind of an interesting question. Well, what kind of a law would you say law of attraction is?
I would describe it as a universal law.
Okay. Okay, good. Yeah, because that's what I was like, what adjective do we put on it, right?
Yeah. And I get that directly from Abraham Hicks. I mean, they describe it strictly as a universal law. In fact, Abraham says it is one of only 3 truly universal laws, and one of those is not gravity. According to Abraham, gravity is actually a localized law, which is interesting.
Okay. Well, I mean, okay. Well, that's a good point, though.
Yeah.
Physically, that would be true, right?
I guess it is. I mean, I don't know enough about the Einsteinian theory of relativity to know exactly how to address it, but it's certainly conceivable to me.
That's interesting. I had never heard that. Okay, yeah. So Florence Scovil Shinn was a very, very popular lecturer and speaker. She's actually an artist, an illustrator, and then she started speaking and lecturing, and I don't know if the speaking and lecturing came before the book or after, but it's funny in her language. Like, for instance, people would come to her because they were having problems, and she was, you know, that's what's funny is today we hear the word healer a lot.
Right.
Right? And so someone has a problem and they go to this healer, or they go to an energy worker maybe. And with her, people would be having problems and they would come to her, and they would come to her for, and the word used in the book is a treatment.
Okay.
And now she would say, okay, she would give them like maybe an affirmation or something and say, okay, now you go on, I'll treat, you go, I'll treat. And I'm like, it was almost like she was using this word instead of the word prayer.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, instead of saying, okay, I'll pray, you go, it's like, I'll do the treatment here. And it cracks me up because some of the language is really funny. It's not really language that you hear. But, you know, we're talking, it's almost, 1925, think about that.
Yeah.
It's almost 100 years ago. So,
oh, yeah.
So, of course, the language is really different. But she talked about there being 3 departments in the mind: the subconscious, the conscious, and the superconscious. She says the subconscious is simply power without direction. It's like steam or electricity. It just does what it's directed to do. It has no power of induction. Whatever man feels deeply or images clearly is impressed upon the subconscious mind and carried out in the minutest detail. she says that the conscious mind is the mortal or carnal mind. It's the human mind. It sees life as it appears to be. It sees death, disaster, sickness, poverty, and limitation of every kind, and it impresses the subconscious. And then she says the superconscious mind is the God mind within each man, and it's the realm of perfect ideas. She says, in it is the perfect pattern spoken of by Plato, the divine design, for there is a divine design for each person. There's a place that you are to fill and no one else can fill, something you are to do which no one else can do. There is a perfect picture of this in the superconscious mind. It usually flashes across the conscious as an unattainable ideal, something too good to be true. In reality, it's man's true destiny or destination, flashed to him from the infinite intelligence which is within himself. So that was kind of in a nutshell where she starts. So she goes back to, we must train the imaging faculty. Now this sounds like what Neville talks about, imagination.
Yeah.
And not just wild imagination that's off wandering, but a trained imagination. An imaging, she says, a person with an imaging faculty trained to image only good will bring into his life every righteous desire of his heart, health, wealth, love, friends, perfect self-expression, highest ideals.
It's interesting, too, this whole concept of the subconscious, conscious, and superconscious minds, because I did a little quick look-up while you're talking about that, and there was a contemporary of hers from India who taught the exact same concepts. And I'm wondering who influenced whom, because it looks like this guy was actually perhaps slightly younger than Shinn, but he was definitely a contemporary. His name was Paramahansa Yogananda, and he was a yogi. He was a guru from India, from Gorakhpur in India, and he lived in the United States. He even died in the United States. I wonder if he was an influence on her, or her on him, or some combination.
It's interesting because it reminds me of Neville and Abdullah.
Oh yeah.
Right? Like Neville got some of his ideas, learned them from a teacher, Abdullah, that came from somewhere else. I can't remember where. And then that would be interesting to do a little research and find out what their connection was, or if there was a connection.
If there was
but
one,
she does
right.
talk about things. That's what I'm saying. She talks about karma, and I think you're right. I think it would be great to kind of go through these laws that were very present in her book. And karma was one of them. And to me, that doesn't seem like something that would have been talked about in 1925 as much in these kind of like churches that these people were speaking in. But I don't know that she was speaking in churches. I just know she was a lecturer. She does use Christian scriptures a lot, but she weaves them in and out from, with some other ideas that are not strictly Christian.
Oh yeah, I can say for with a high degree of confidence, if Shinn had been discussed at all in the churches of that time, it would probably have been in the context of she's damned and going to hell, because bringing up concepts of karma and so forth, that's heathen talk. You don't do that, right? So yeah, she definitely would not have been accepted in the church.
She talked a lot about like inspired action. She says always follow a hunch.
Aha. That sounds very familiar.
Talking about intuition. As a matter of fact, Louise Hay, who had, Louise Hay is just not with us any longer as of this year, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she just passed on.
But her publishing company, someone wrote to her, and they had some writings of Florence Scovil Shinn that had never been published, and she bought them, and she published them. And it's a book called The Magic of Intuition. I don't have that one in front of me, but I do own it. And it's actually a beautiful little book. It's made like a gift book. Like all the pages are color, and I can't even describe it. But it's beautiful. It'd be a beautiful present to give someone.
Oh, nice. Very nice.
And it's her teaching on intuition, which is, it's a lot of the same stuff that's in her Game of Life book. But she tells a lot of stories, and, you've been talking a lot about stories lately.
Yep.
Storytelling and how important it is to be able to tap into that energy of telling a good story. And,
oh, yeah.
like I'm looking down, and here's what just one page says. She says, many people have brought disaster into their lives through idle words. For example, she says, a woman once asked me why her life was now one of poverty of limitation. Formerly, she had a home, she was surrounded by beautiful things, and had plenty of money. We found she had often tired of the management of her home and had said repeatedly, I'm sick and tired of things. I wish I lived in a trunk. She added, today, I'm living in that trunk. She had spoken herself into a trunk. The subconscious mind has no sense of humor, and people often joke themselves into unhappy experiences. She says, for example, a woman who had a great deal of money joked continually about getting ready for the poorhouse. In a few years, she was almost destitute, having impressed the subconscious mind with a picture of lack and limitation. Fortunately, the law works both ways, and a situation of lack may be changed to one of plenty. For example, a woman came to me one hot summer day for a treatment. That's what I was talking about before.
Right.
I think that's so funny. A woman came to me one hot summer's day for a treatment for prosperity. She was worn out, dejected, and discouraged, and she said she possessed just $8 in the world. I said, good. We'll bless the $8 and multiply them as Jesus Christ multiplied the loaves and fishes, for he taught that every man had the power to bless and to multiply, to heal and to prosper. And she said, what shall I do next? I replied, follow intuition. Have you a hunch to do anything or go anywhere? Intuition means intuition, or to be taught from within. It's man's unerring guide, and I will deal more fully with its laws in the following chapter. But the woman replied, I don't know. I seem to have a hunch to go home. I've just enough money for car fare. Her home was in a distant city and was one of lack and limitation. And the reasoning mind or intellect would have said, stay in New York, get some work, make some money. Mm-hmm. But I replied, well, then go home. Never violate a hunch. I spoke the following words for her. Infinite Spirit, open the way for great abundance for her. She is an irresistible magnet for all that belongs to her by divine right. I told her to repeat it continually also. She left for home immediately. In calling on a woman one day, she linked up with an old friend of her family, and through this friend, she received hundreds of dollars in a most miraculous way. She has said to me often, tell people about the woman who came to you with $8 and a hunch.
Uh-huh.
So she tells, her book is just full of stories like this.
Yeah. And clearly a manifestation story, too.
Pardon me?
Clearly a manifestation story, too.
Yes. I mean, all of her stories, over and over.
Yeah. Very, very cool stuff. It also, you used a word there, or she used a word, plenty. We usually use the word abundant, but plenty is a good one. That's one we should probably incorporate more, you know?
It is a good one.
It's a little bit old-fashioned, but it's good.
Well, I kind of like some of these old-fashioned words because I think sometimes we get in a rut with our words, and when we see a word that's not common to us, it kind of shakes us like, what? You know? Mm-hmm. And brings our attention back, I think. So,
yeah, I think so. I agree. Yeah,
so, Walt, let's take a second and tell everybody listening how they can subscribe.
Oh, we haven't done that yet, have we?
We haven't.
Well, we should do that because we always do that. Well, we almost always do that. Not always, but usually we do.
Speaking of plenty, because you said the word plenty, and I thought, you know what? That's what we want. We want plenty of subscribers.
Well, we want plenty of subscribers, but more than that, we find that when people do subscribe, they listen to plenty of episodes. I mean, the numbers are showing quite clearly that every month, the people who are listeners listen to more and more episodes. Last month, the average listener, and we can measure listeners by who the different IP addresses are. The average listener listened to 30 episodes last month, which is phenomenal. And it's really the true reason why we keep growing, because people are just listening to more and more episodes. So subscribing is a good idea if you have not yet already subscribed. And it's pretty easy to do. You just go to the homepage of loatoday.net. You'll see a couple places there where there are links you can click. and it just says click here to subscribe, that kind of thing. It's pretty straightforward. If you're on an iPhone, it makes it really easy because iPhones, the operating system, come with a podcast app built in, so it'll just tie right into that. I did, Cindy, run into a situation with our friends last night. One of them, she had actually deleted her podcast app from her iPhone. So it was an interesting test. So she said, "Can you subscribe me?" So I said, "Well, sure, yeah." So she handed me the phone, and I'm playing with it. So I just went to loatoday.net. I clicked on the click to subscribe, and a little message popped up saying, "Your podcast app has been deleted, but we can reinstall it for you. Click here." So I said, "Okay." So I clicked there. It just took me to the App Store and linked me right into where the app was. Click here to download it, went back to loatoday.net, clicked again on the subscribe, and boom, we were subscribed. It was great. So really easy. Yeah, very easy on iPhone. Android phones like a Samsung or a Motorola, LG, Nokia, any of those popular Android phones, it's a little more complex because they don't come with a built-in podcast app. But those are easily found in the Play Store. Just go to the Play Store. A nice free one that you can get, doesn't have any fee associated, is Podcast Manager. Download that. And then once inside Podcast Manager, after you open that app up, you could do a search for LOA Today, and boom, we pop right up. So it's easy to subscribe. And, of course, the watchwords for the week are actually subscribe and share. So once you've subscribed, share it with friends and encourage them to subscribe, too, because not a lot of people know about the show yet. And the more people find out about it, the more people are going to want to listen, because that's what the stats show us. People love listening. So there you have it.
Here's the thing, is that the whole idea about you are what you eat?
Yes.
And then you hear people say you are what you read, right? Well, it's you are what you take in, right? And so the more you connect with these ideas and with, like you last night, having dinner with your friends who also practice, conscious creation and know about the law of attraction, the more you take in on that level, then the more it feels natural, and the more you start operating in that vibration where it gets easier and easier. So that's the thing about listening, is that it's not just our podcast, it's law of attraction and what you read and what you hear and who you talk to, and when all those things come together, you will start noticing big shifts in your life, just because that's where your mind is focused.
That's true, yeah. Plus, we also make it fun. So we know for a fact that we do. There's no doubt about it. And we get a lot of feedback telling us they like how fun it is. But there's also no doubt, and the scientific research bears this out, when you are feeling good and when you are happy, all kinds of things happen. Happiness leads to success. We're seeing that from the positive psychology movement. They're showing repeatedly people who start off happy and then go for success get to success a lot easier. People who laughter has been proven by the medical establishment to be a healing agent. So laughter will help you lead. We help you laugh. We help you heal. We help you get better because you're the one doing the laughing. So there are a lot of direct, actually scientifically verifiable benefits. And I won't claim that anyone has ever done a study on LOA Today to see if LOA Today causes healing. That's not my claim. But certainly the things that we engage in are things that are proven to be healthy. So just wanted to throw that out.
Well, yesterday, the articles that we were looking at in the podcast that we did yesterday about scientifically, proven ideas that supported happiness. Mm-hmm. And that first paragraph, which you were just talking about some of it right now, was kind of mind-blowing. It was like people that are happier are more often married, they're more often happily married, they make more money, they like their job better, they're healthier.
Yeah.
It's like, it was the list of what everyone says they want. So
it reminds me of the study that was done on the nuns. I think I told you about the nuns study. In 1930-ish, somewhere around there, the Catholic Church, the Mother Superior of the Church in the United States, sent out letters to all of the nun novitiates, basically asking them to send in a little biography about themselves and to talk about themselves. And in these biographies, the nuns spelled out a lot about what was in their lives. They were asked to say why they wanted to become nuns. And much later on in the 1980s, the earliest researchers of the positive psychology movement found this trove of information, asked for permission to access it in more detail, and they took these various nuns' self-written autobiographies and passed them out to people who were not involved in the study and just asked those people to evaluate. If you would evaluate this person, would you say this person was optimistic, pessimistic, somewhere in the middle? They had like a 5-point scale. The ones who the independent evaluators said were very optimistic were something like, they were expected to live like 20 times longer, not 20 times, 20 years longer than the ones that the evaluators said were pessimistic. And they based that on what actually happened to these nuns because they know what the history of the nuns were, right? So they found out that the ones who start off with an optimistic attitude lived 20 years longer and healthier lives and happier lives. I mean, there's science proving very, very clearly that your happiness level directly impacts what goes on later on. And by the way, there is good news too. The good news is if you are a pessimistic person who wants to turn optimistic, that still pays off because there's another study that was done with a bunch of older men in their, I think they were in their 60s and 70s. This was done in the late 1970s. And the study was set up so that all the men in the study were tested for various physical traits and so forth, strength and eyesight and a whole bunch of stuff like that. And then they were put into two environments. There was a control group and the test group. The control group was given an environment and they just spent a week together. The test group were given an environment, but they were asked to behave like it was 20 years earlier. So they were given name badges that had their pictures from when they were 20 years younger. And there were pictures of like President Eisenhower on the wall. And there were Time magazines and Life magazines from the 1950s. And then they went around that week just behaving like it was the 1950s. And a week later, they were tested on the same physical tests that were done beforehand. And they were found to be stronger, healthier, better eyesight. I mean, all kinds of medical problems had cleared up. I mean, just amazing what had happened in 1 week. So clearly, just the optimistic viewpoint of thinking that you're younger actually makes you produce all these wonderful physical improvements in your life. So it doesn't matter what age you start at. The point is, if you start with that optimistic place, you're going to be in a much better results sometime very shortly down the line.
That's amazing. The power of the mind.
Oh,
right?
Yeah. Which is exactly what Shinn's talking about here. I mean, she talks about these laws and concepts and so forth, but she's really talking about the power of the mind, subconscious, conscious, superconscious.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, that is the underlying, thread through the entire, well, I'd say book, but her books, period. Mm-hmm. She tells a story about a child that used to, I wish I could just know where it was and just open the page to the book, and read it. But she tells a story of this child who used to, it was a girl that used to dress up like a widow. Like she would put a black dress and a veil on and pretend that she was a widow and that everyone would, and come out and the people would, oh, look, she's pretending, which kind of creeped me out, to be honest. Mm. But she says this girl grew up to be a young woman, got married, and was almost instantly widowed.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, wow. Mm. But lots and lots of stories, and the stories about how our subconscious kind of affects everything. And so we can, that word that I used before that from her, that she said, a trained imaging faculty. So a mind that has been trained, and we do that through practice.
Mm. Yep.
And then we can start, focusing, because what we focus on expands. And so she's going to say it over and over and over. And she talks also about, when she talks about affirmations, she talks about repetition, and sometimes just silently or audibly. That to me is another form of like training our subconscious, is to keep feeding it the same idea.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you were just talking about even if you're a person that is pessimistic,
Mm-hmm.
and that person is more than likely just telling that story. And so, that whole idea of fake it till you make it.
Right.
Sometimes we just have to make, I think anyway, sometimes we just have to make the decision that we're going to be different. When I was a kid, I think it was the year that I was 10 or 11. That summer is it's one summer I really remember because I went to stay with some cousins that I didn't know for like 3 weeks.
Oh, wow.
And so while I was there, it was just one of those things that was so different than my regular life. And so suddenly I was spending time with all these cousins, and we were living at their house, and I was really, really shy, just painfully shy.
Mm-hmm.
And when people said hi to me when I was little, I wouldn't even look up.
Wow.
And there was a girl that was one of their neighborhood friends that was very gregarious and friendly and, not shy at
Mm-hmm.
all.
Right.
And she was kind of the life of the party. And she was really a nice person, too. It's like she, as soon as she met me, she liked me. She liked everybody. She was nice to everybody. She was fun. She laughed a lot. And I recognized that I remember thinking to myself, this is better. This is a better way. This is better than being painfully shy. I think this is better. And I just decided, as a 10 or 11-year-old, I just decided that I wasn't going to be shy anymore. It just wasn't working for me. It wasn't paying off, to be scared and shy and ducking my head all the time and being afraid to talk to people. Look at this girl. This girl is having the time of her life. She's not afraid to talk to anybody. She walks right up. She shakes your hand. She has fun. And I just made that decision. And it still kind of, shocks me sometimes when I think back, gosh, I was only like 10 or 11 years old, and I just decided, I'm just not going to be shy anymore.
What a great time, though, to be exposed to somebody like that in your life, because that's a time when it's really easy to make a change like that, comparatively speaking. And you got it at exactly the best time to do it. That's fantastic.
Yeah, and so I can't say that I immediately went to being hugely gregarious, but in a way I did. I just changed that behavior, and yeah, it might not always be that easy, but it is that possible.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
To just when people say that they don't like a certain thing about themselves, that, I wish I was more like that. Well, just put your toes in the water, just try it a little bit. And that, I think it can make all the difference. And so when we're talking about these stories and these things, this is what affirmations are for. They are to help us change a belief pattern that we have.
Mm-hmm. Which you
right?
did.
Because the beliefs are running the show.
That's right, yeah. I was reading a Wikipedia article about the book, because I don't have a copy of the book, and it was enumerating, I think it's 7 laws that Shinn names in the book. The first one being the law of expectancy, which ties in directly to what you're talking about here. According to the Wikipedia article, Shinn emphasizes the power of the imagination to bring about life events. So you describe a couple stories like that. And then there's a quote, I presume from the book, whatever man feels deeply or images clearly is impressed upon the subconscious mind and carried out in minutest detail. Well, that pretty much describes your experience with your new friend.
Yeah, true.
Because she made a deep impression.
Expectancy.
Yeah.
I like the way that sounds, right? Because, because it's forward-looking,
mm-hmm.
and it's saying that I can expect what I'm focusing on to play itself out in reality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, you said whatever man feels deeply.
Yes, whatever man feels deeply or images clearly is impressed upon the subconscious mind and carried out in minutest detail.
Yeah, so there we're going back to what we talked about last week with Neville about that, feeling assuming the feeling of the wish fulfilled.
Right.
The feeling, to feel it deeply. And that's one thing that I encourage myself sometimes to not just make an affirmation, which can be really simple. It can just be like an I am statement, like, right? But to not just make that statement, but to feel it, which takes some time. I don't mean, huge loads of time. It might just be a few seconds, but we have to be conscious of it, of taking the time to feel it, taking the moment to say, what would this really feel like? There's even an exercise about that where you use all 5 senses to connect to whatever that affirmation is.
Mm-hmm.
So in other words, if I make an affirmation that I am creative, then I might take all 5 of my senses and figure out how that creativity plays out through my senses.
Mm-hmm.
So when
Sure.
I'm painting, I might think, oh yeah, I can feel the paintbrush in my hand. I can smell the paint. I can taste the coffee that I'm drinking while I paint. It's like going through, because then you're involving all of your senses, and it helps you to have to be able to feel it, because we want to feel it. It's the feelings. I sound like Neville now, but the feelings are the key. And so using our imagination to bring things about, I like that she tied that in. Okay,
I
so
like that too.
The law of expectancy. What other ones are there?
I just wanted to comment too. It's one of the things that Abraham emphasizes a lot, that it's the combination of what you focus on and how emotionally strongly you focus on it that is what enhances the vibrational essence of whatever thought you're creating and whatever manifestation you're leading up to. So again, once again, reinforcing this whole idea, the emotion drives it. The emotion makes it powerful.
Yeah, what is the, that's actually, I think, my favorite Abraham Hicks book, is the one that focuses on emotions.
Right.
And
It's
I can't
actually
think of the name of it.
It's actually called the Astonishing Power of Emotions. David and I are talking about it on Sundays now. But yeah, it's a terrific book.
Oh, you're doing that. When is that happening?
We started 2 Sundays ago. David and I, of course, do the Sunday broadcast, and we've done it for 2 weeks now, and we're just going to keep working until we're done with the book.
Oh, it's a great book. I love that book.
Yeah.
So we've got this common thread running through, Abraham Hicks and Florence Scovil Shinn and Neville, that when we focus on something and we allow it to bring itself out in our emotions, we feel it deeply, that's when we're on the right track to bringing it into our experience.
You asked what the other laws were according to this article. The second one ties into the story of the widow that you talked about. It's called the Law of Substitution. According to Scovil Shinn, sometimes our desires are misdirected. And, quote from the book, many people are in ignorance of their true destinies and are striving for things and situations which do not belong to them and would only bring failure and dissatisfaction if attained. Well, that's pretty much what the person who dressed as a widow did.
Oh, yes, and there's another story she tells about a woman that, and this is a good learning story, because the story was about a woman that, I think it was a house that she wanted that was like her neighbor's house. It's so funny, right? Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's house, or whatever. I mean, it was the exact out picture. This woman really, really wanted this house, and she ends up getting it somehow, but it's not in a good way. Like, I think the man that owned it died, and, it's like she comes into possession of the house, and it's just sort of awful. Like, she's not happy there. It's too much for her to take care of. And Florence Scovil Shinn, I think, tells her that the better way to have done this, and it seems so simple, but would just be to picture for yourself something similar. Like, and I remember learning from a mentor the idea of this, its equivalent, or whatever would be better. So when we're wanting to, attract a certain thing or consciously create a certain thing or experience, we can tack on this, the equivalent, or whatever would be better. And I've also heard people tack on, like, for the highest good of all, right? It's like, yeah, I really want that house, but I don't want somebody to have to die for me to have it, right? So that's interesting, because I do not recall ever reading that, the Law of Substitution, but that's interesting. So,
let's see, does it say where in the book it is? There is a little note saying, oh, no, this, oh, wait a minute, where it is. Yeah, no, it's here.
There's the concepts discussed in the book. Oh, I have no doubt it's there. It's one of those words that didn't stand out for me right away. But that's really interesting that, I just like that it's summed up in a concept like that, the Law of Substitution. So it's like you're trying to attract something that's, she talks a lot about things being your divine right. And so that may or may not line up with, personal beliefs about attaining things, but it lines up with her idea of the Law of Substitution, because it sounds to me that I think you said misdirected. So it's like you're desiring something that is not for you to have. And the truth is, I think, is that there's always, it's the reason why we shouldn't get too tangled up in the hows and too attached to specific outcomes, because in my experience, the universe usually has something even better in mind. So it's this, its equivalent, or whatever would be better. If you're looking for, let's say you're trying to get a particular job, well, maybe there's a better one that you haven't even recognized. So it's this or its equivalent, or whatever would be better.
Yeah, I'm not sure I completely agree with her phrasing, but I understand the sentiment behind it, and I think the sentiment has value to it. The phrasing doesn't quite work out. I mean, she talks about situations which do not belong to you. Well, that basically says that you are not allowed to want something that somebody else has, because there's only one of them, and so you'd basically be stealing from somebody else. And Abraham has taught us pretty clearly that's not the way things actually work. There's really no way to do that, because there's plenty of abundance for everybody. But I think the value in what she's saying is, if we take it as, if you are focusing on something that somebody else has and it doesn't make you feel good to do that, it's not a good feeling thing, then you're setting yourself up for failure. And I think that would be really, really accurate. It's not exactly what she's saying, but
I see this
a
lot with people who want to attract a relationship, and it's a relationship with someone who's, already in a relationship, or it's right. And I think it would be the same thing with wanting to attract. Maybe I'm, wanting to attract a job or a position, and there's already someone happily doing that job.
Yep. The situation with the relationship with somebody who is trying to attract somebody else who's already in a relationship, I find that almost exclusively people who are wanting to do that are themselves people who are exhibiting very strong codependent tendencies. They want this other person because they think this other person is going to fill those gaps in themselves. And in the process of filling those gaps, they're going to feel better, which is the wrong reason to find a relationship, because you can't build a stable relationship on that. That's why codependency doesn't work. But that's basically what they're doing,
Exactly. And so that's what comes up for me when I hear that description that you read of, misdirected desires. I'm like, I can see a couple instances of that, that it's always going to be better to be a little more open to the universe and to tapping down into, like what you said. It's like, I have had people email me, like, about an ex, and it's like, I have to get this person back in my life. Like, they're desperate.
Yes.
And it's exactly what you said. It's because they think that that person is going to answer something for them, a need they have, and that couldn't be further from the truth.
The desperation tells us otherwise. The fact that they're so desperate for that person proves that they're not trying to attract the person for the right reasons. They're trying to attract the person in order to basically avoid themselves having to work on something in themselves. They want that other person to do it for them.
Right. No, that's true, and that's why, the relationship that we have with ourselves it's the one that has to be worked on.
Oh, yeah.
And then all the other relationships they'll work themselves out, right?
Louise and I often talked about why is it that we waited so long in life before we met, because we didn't meet till we were in our 40s. And we very quickly realized we wouldn't have wanted to know each other earlier on because we had too many issues to work out.
Well, it's funny. I think there was, and I don't watch TV, but I get every once in a while I hear certain shows. Wasn't there a TV show, something like The Starter Wife or something like that?
It sounds vaguely familiar, but I don't really know it.
We hear people talk about, the exact same thing. It's like we too met later in life, and we often realize, okay, we met at a time when we had worked a lot of our own stuff out, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And we knew who we were, and we knew, and so yeah, that makes a difference. But okay, so the law of expectancy was the first one, and the law of substitution was the one
right
that we're talking about now. And then what's next?
The next is the law of karma, which she describes as the law of cause and effect, and she draws the concept of sowing and reaping as the example of it.
Okay. Sowing and reaping, whatever we sow.
Right.
Okay.
And that's followed by the law of non-resistance, which is considered a corollary to the law of karma. And it basically is, do not react to a negative situation with more negativity, as that will bring back more harm down the track.
Okay, well that's interesting, because I always like to point out that non-resistance is imperative to conscious creation, right? I mean, when we get resistance, then that's when things stop happening for us. But it's not always meeting a negative situation with more negativity.
Right.
Right? Sometimes it's just being, and I'm not talking about non-resistance now, I'm talking about resistance.
Right.
Sometimes resistance comes when we're just too attached to a specific outcome.
Exactly, yeah. So her version is a much more limited version than what it really could be. I would agree with that.
Yeah. So we've got, and I think that karma and non-resistance in this instance, sounds like she's tying them together somehow.
Well, according to this, it's saying that she considers non-resistance to be a corollary. I might call it a special case of the law of karma.
Oh, got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. It's what follows. Okay.
Right.
So the law of karma is, she's saying, kind of what comes around goes around, right? Whatever we put out there is what we're going to get back.
Which is very deliberate creation.
Yeah, I have my own teaching on karma. I don't know if it would. I think karma is what happens when we don't make a plan.
Okay. I've heard worse definitions of karma. I think that one's actually a pretty good one, so that I can live with that one.
Well, it's sort of like the obvious thing that happens when things just start rolling, and when we can actually make a plan to change things. It's sort of like that story we tell. Oh, I'm pessimistic. That's just how I am. I'm a pessimist, blah, 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 right? And so that ball's just going to keep on rolling.
Yeah, that's true.
And it's going to just create what it creates until I make a plan to change it and say, I'm tired of being shy, and I want to be the gregarious one. I'm tired of being a pessimist. I think I'm going to start bringing some more positivity in my life and move towards optimism. And at that point, all that karma that's, if you want to call it that, that's snowballing, it often shifts and changes. So, okay, we won't get off on a tangent there, but we've got karma and non-resistance.
Yeah.
I think we've covered 4.
That's 4, right? The fifth one is the law of forgiveness. And it says, the law of forgiveness or grace is a higher law. Quote, Christianity is founded upon the law of forgiveness. Christ has redeemed himself from the curse of the karmic law, and the Christ within each man is his redeemer and salvation from all inharmonious conditions.
Oh, okay. So now she's really tapping into the
Christian thing, yeah. That's really pretty heavy.
Now, what I think is interesting is that she and Neville both do this.
Yeah.
And when they talk about forgiveness, now this is interesting, I think. They talk about the definition of sin as what we know that the actual definition is just missing the mark. And so, I mean, in the original language, missing the mark. If you picture shooting a bow and arrow at a target and you miss it, you miss it. And so forgiveness, I think it's Neville that says the forgiveness of sin is just doing it over and making the mark. It's just fixing it. It's just getting the arrow and shooting it at the target, right? And so it takes a lot of that kind of really heavy, judgy kind of right definition out of that. It's like the law of forgiveness is just setting it straight. It's just like, okay, I'm going to forgive this pessimist part of me, and I'm going to be an optimist. I'm just going to move towards that direction. I want to hit this optimism mark.
I think it's a lot. I think it also includes the idea that if you miss the mark, be easy on yourself. Forgive yourself. It's not that big of a deal. Let go. Okay, so you missed the mark. Big deal.
Yeah, and it's not, this is what's interesting. She says, even using, you said, redeemed us from the curse of the karmic law. And so that's what I'm talking about. It's like inharmonious conditions. It's like these things that got created because my mind was dwelling on this, thing I didn't want to happen. I was dwelling on these situations that might come to pass, and it's like that's kind of, I think you could wrap that up in that curse of the karmic law kind of statement and say, no, we're gonna redeem ourselves out of that. We're gonna aim at a different target here, and we're just gonna adjust this, and that's the forgiveness part. We've made it into something really heavy, but I don't think it has to be.
I don't think I think it's actually making a mountain out of a molehill myself.
Yeah, I think so. All right, and so
okay, so let's see. We got two more left. We got the law of use, and Shinn explains.
Oh, I love when she talks about this.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe you should talk about the law of use.
Well, what does it say?
It says many people are in ignorance of the fact that gifts and things are investments, and that hoarding and saving invariably lead to loss.
She tells a story one time of a woman that collected jewelry, necklaces, and I think she ends up like losing them somehow. But what the point she makes is that she never enjoyed them and she never wore them. She just kept them away in a box. She just collected them and didn't, use them and enjoy them. And you talk. Did you use the word hoarding in there somewhere? I think?
Yeah, it says, in that hoarding and saving invariably lead to loss.
Yeah, and so it's the idea that, yes, it's fine for us to have an abundance, and we also need to use it and be willing to let go of it and enjoy it and share it and not hoard it in the sense of, not even enjoying it for ourselves. And I think it's really important. I think that law of use is really important to pay attention to. And we need to be using what we're given and enjoying it and being willing to share it and not holding so tightly to everything.
Okay. And then the final one is the law of love. And she quotes Jesus saying actually this isn't a perfect quote, but it says, every man on this planet is taking his initiation in love. A new commandment I give unto you, that ye love one another. So. Oh,
well, that's the perfect one to end the show on, right?
Yeah, right.
Because actually, I mean, the law of love kind of covers everything.
It does.
Right? So
it does.
If we make every decision that we have on love, and self-love included,
yes,
then I think that all of these other laws will serve us well, because that's the main one there. That's the important one.
All right. Well, there's Florence Scovil Shinn, and I'm glad that you brought her to our attention. So this has been well worthwhile, and we just barely used up the time perfectly. So not even much time left to say subscribe and share, except we will say subscribe and share. And Cindy, someone who's looking for some personal attention, how do they get a hold of you again?
Oh, they can find me online at cindychavez.com, CINDIECHAVEZ.com. Come find me. Say hello.
There we are. Okay, Cindy, been great. Let's do it again next week.
Let's do it next week.
All right, sounds good to me. We'll see you all later as well here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.